Welcome, fellow synthesizer sickos. Tonight we are checking out the Roland Super JX polyphonic synthesizer JX-10 from 1986. Angelo Badalamenti used this synthesizer pretty much exclusively as his analog synthesizer for scoring the wonderful works of David Lynch. The song Laura's Theme from Twin Peaks needs no introduction from me. One of the most beautiful pieces of music ever written for television. And tonight, we're going to be diving into this synth, and in particular, this patch soundtrack was used by Badalamenti not just on Twin Peaks, but also even on movies like Mulholland Drive and Inland Empire. If you guys are familiar with that score, this one, you might know this one too. So, of course, in Mulholland Drive, that theme, you can hear that it's layered with an orchestra, but you can also clearly hear it's this same soundtrack preset that was used from Twin Peaks. And what's interesting is, if you look at the chord structure, we're in C minor here for the beginning of Laura's Theme. And we actually start on an inverted, what would this be? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th chord here. So we're starting on an inverted 6th chord. You can also think of that as like the sharped 5th there drops down to C minor. And then we get this high note. So if we then just drop that 3 semitones, 1, 2, 3, down to A minor, and we look at what's going on, we've actually got that same 5th chord, and then the sharp, and then now sort of the 4th instead of going to. Instead of something like that, we drop down. So the soundtrack patch to me is the essence of that dark, Lynchian, mysterious sound. And we're gonna get so nerdy tonight. If you haven't been here before, this is the live stream we do every Wednesday night here on YouTube. So please subscribe if this is the type of thing you'd like to see more of. But we're gonna get super nerdy here, checking out everything about this synthesizer and what gives it that magic, because there are so many instruments out there, and there's nothing wrong with using software, but I'm fortunate enough to have this in the studio for a time, and while I have it, I want to share it with you guys. And so we're going to get into why this is this. And like Dubstation Zero says, this synthesizer and its predecessor, the JX-8P, has the best envelopes for pads. Some people will complain that, you know, they're not as snappy for percussive sounds. There are percussive sounds in the synth. We will get there. And Modeman, yeah, so the same guy, the indomitable Eric Persing, who programmed soundtrack in the D50, also programmed it here, but it's a very different sound. Here, the sound is very, this dark, moody. just this huge sound. Whereas soundtrack on the D50, also one of the most beautiful patches ever made. I always say Roland had the Eric Persing advantage in the 80s, which is any company that employed that man was destined to sell a lot of synthesizers. And if you don't know, Eric Persing has gone on to create his own company, Spectrasonics, which has made Omnisphere, and that is the greatest software synthesizer of all time. So he continues to innovate and make beautiful sounding instruments to this day. But digging into what makes the Super JX so special, and it is the fact that most analog synths, especially from Roland in the 80s, had 6 voices. I guess the Jupiter 8 had 8, but most of them had 6 voices. The Juno 660 and 106, the Roland JX3P and JX8P. Jupiter 4 only had 4 voices. But 6 is a very common number for vintage analog polysynths. And where this synth came out in history, 1983, Yamaha puts out the DX-7, which basically ignites the digital synthesis craze. Nobody really loves analog synths anymore. Everybody's really excited about digital synths. Oh my, how the times have changed. And so Roland is sort of like a Hail Mary to try one more time to make a synthesizer people will want to buy, made the Super JX. And in fact, this is the last analog synth Roland ever made for something like 20-something years, I believe. The Roland JDXi, which came out in 2014 or so, was their first analog synth. And after the JDXA, which more or less series, I know it's a JD, and that's implying that it's more like the JD800 behind me, but it's not. It's more like a JX. And with that, they had a lot of issues, so they've gone back to just making only digital synths. So this is really one of the last analog synths Roland ever made. And it's just incredible. But anyways, if we jump over here to this first track, or the first patch that you would have when you open this bad boy up, what's interesting is you can immediately hear what's going on that made this synthesizer special. Oh, right up here. Oh, let's see if I can play chords. That was rough, but what you're hearing there is that the JX-10 is actually 2 JX8Ps stacked on top of each other in a sense. So this is a 12-voice analog polysynth, and it's designed to be used in tandem. So in fact, if you want to really pick apart what we're hearing here in this almost DX7-esque sound, we've got 2 parts. We have the body, which is velocity sensitive. So this synthesizer is a velocity sensitive and aftertouch enabled synth. You can hear that the harder you strike the key, the brighter the body of that sound is. And then you also have a tine. And so this is the same way that the DX7 actually makes e-piano sounds, is by having a short sound that's bright and a little atonal, and then a sustained sound. And so, hey, Hypothesis, how are you doing? Just a little bit of Valhalla vintage verb tonight. I probably turned down a little bit on this sound, doesn't need it as much. But you can hear that that's in there, and if I move it over into split, we can actually hear the different sounds. So over here, you can hear that little tine. Now, of course, it's very low, right? But we can move the split point if we wanted or whatever. But just to illustrate what we're hearing, we have this kind of atonal thing. And then over here, we have the actual body. So it's a very beautiful sound. And again, kind of tying that together with the Yamaha DX7, what Roland was trying to do was make an analog synth that was really going to grab people's attention and be like, okay, this is the greatest analog synth of all time. And that's why it has this giant, I mean, it's hard maybe to see on the screen here, but this is a giant boat of a keyboard, and it's huge. Now, the downside of all the JXs, well, before I say that, I just want to real quick do a toast tonight to David Lynch, because this stream is in part a tribute to him. The greatest artist of our generation sadly passed away recently. And I know for me and probably many people in the chat, David Lynch has had such an incredible influence on us. So if I could get some scum cheers in the chat, I would just like to raise a toast to the man himself, David Lynch. Cheers, guys. He brought us to places both wonderful and strange, and changed the world of TV for sure with Twin Peaks, but also made such incredible movies like Eraserhead, Elephant Man, Mulholland Drive, just so many, Dune, of course. So thank you guys so much for the emojis. It's awesome. Now, I think I saw, what was it? Where are we? Yeah, actually, Machine Storm. It's interesting, having the JX next to the JD800 behind me, you really get the vibe that they're essentially made from the exact same materials. And what's so funny is that the JD800 is often considered to be one of those legendary synthesizers that commands a high price tag. These guys you could still get for relatively cheap. I think, around $1,000 or so, which for a 12 voice analog polysynth, it's all analog, digitally, it's DCOs, so digitally controlled analog oscillators, meaning it's all analog, but the tuning is digitally controlled, which of course in 1986 would have been a positive thing. It would have been seen as keeping the synth stable so you could take it out on tour. And like Nick was saying, Dubstation Zero, this synth was used by Richard Wright of Pink Floyd, actually, and I believe it was on the Wall tour as well, which is pretty incredible. Lost Highway, incredible. Actually, I didn't even think about it. I happen to have it within arm's reach. I've got the Lost Highway laser disc right here. But yeah. It's so the JX-10 does have weird MIDI implementation, and part of repairing the synthesizer so I could have it ready for the stream was replacing the EEPROM with a Vickoven EEPROM. So what that does is basically update the memory so you can have more patches, and fixes all the weird MIDI implementation stuff so you can sysex patches into it. For whatever reason, the JX-8P doesn't seem to have that problem, if I'm correct. So to answer your question to Karmic, I'm fine with 61. 76 always seems a little bit over the top. Monty asks, who's Pink Floyd? I'm from the UK. The red glue is a major issue. Yeah. Andresio, welcome. Vintage keyboards are D50, DX7, M1, and CZ3000. Tell me what you think about it. I think that's a great setup. Oh, same issues with the 8P. I was going to say. So let's play some more patches, and then we can talk a little bit more about what makes the synth cool. This one, Back and Forth Chase, is such a modern patch. So what's happening here is that this synthesizer has what's called chase play, which allows you to have one of the two layers, because you basically have one JX8P layer and then another one, and you can actually delay those. So if I turn that off, I think we can hear the difference. And if I turn that back on, I thought so, Monty. I think even... So it's so interesting the way that that sound sort of bounces back and forth. This voice is just an incredible patch. That breathy character is so beautiful. I'm actually quite surprised to hear a sound that sounds that good from something that's not a rompler, because it honestly does a voice sound better than any of the patches in the D50, I would say. I do not have a DX5. I already talked to someone in the chat. Oh, Oilfield Pirate. DX5. Wow. Death by Media. Yeah, and it was actually the MKS-70, which is the rack mount version of this that Angelo Badalamenti used. I myself am a fan of big, bad polyphonic synthesizer, so I like the physical version, even though there were some improvements. I think the MKS-70, it's more or less the same, but they have slightly different envelopes, I believe. So there's sort of a mystique to all of the JX synths because they're all a little different, and it can be hard to know which one to buy. Hopefully, in the near future, I'll be doing a video comparing the three main JXs, and I hope to even compare it against like a free software and maybe even like one of the boutiques or something like that. So you can kind of have like an idea of if you want to get one of these JX synthesizers, which is a good one to go for. And the other thing is that I think that the Roland JX series, can I get some scum Rolands in the chat? But it's kind of like Dubstation saying, it's crazy how much the snobs turn their nose up at the JX-10 8P. It's so butter. Yeah, I would say that the JX series is actually the sweet spot when it comes to sound quality versus cost when it comes to vintage Rolands. You can get a JX 8P for like $600, $700, something like that right now. Probably the best value to DCO per voice analog vintage synths out there. I mean, just incredible. Of course, it doesn't have the knobs that you get on a Juno. So you have an alpha dial, which is borrowed from the Alpha Juno. You can program with it. Probably a little frustrating with a synthesizer this complex. African mallets. Sounds great through that reverb. Lots of velocity sensitivity. This one's called Is This Fat? So I think that answers the question, is this fat? fat it quite certainly, or most certainly is. She's thick, absolutely fat. Cheers, you guys. I too have a sickness for the thickness. So cheers to all the thick synthesizer sounds out there. Breathing brass. I know I'm going to try my best not to over talk about this, but it is the case that to me, where's my track here? I think I've lost it. The sound of this synthesizer is so good. It's got something very special about it in terms of the actual patch design. And I think that Eric Persing just did an incredible job with this. Low string pad. So this one's adjacent to soundtrack, but has a slower and maybe slightly brighter thing. Well, Tripwell, that is the very interesting thing about this, which is there are some differences. The biggest difference I'm aware of between the 8P and the 10, at least what you read about online, is the chorus is different or implemented different. I don't know if it's the same chip or not. But yeah, it's just fascinating, the differences on some of these synths and how they, even a very minute thing can lead to differences. So again, for anybody who's interested in this, I will be doing a very deep dive comparison between all of the JX synthesizers soon on this channel. So if you haven't yet, please subscribe so you can see that. Almost like a hint of that vocal-like character. Really cool, almost industrial, glassy type stuff down there. So I have a JX3P behind me. I'm pointing at it right now. And I can confirm that definitely sounds different than this. I don't have an 8P yet. Should be arriving any day now. But the filter in the JX3P is an IR3109 chip, which is, for some of you synth sickos out there already know, that is the famous filter chip in the Roland Jupiter 8. So it's going to have some of that Jupiter 8 magic in it. It doesn't fully self-oscillate like a Jupiter 8 does. So you can actually go inside the synth and adjust the resonance trim pots and get it to fully self-oscillate like a Jupiter 8. But so it's going to have a little bit more of a mellow sound, I think. It's also just like a really warm, fat sounding synth. This synthesizer inherits its filter from the JX8P and the Roland Alpha Juno, which came out, I believe, the year before in 1985. And that is the IR3R05 filter chip, which is very similar to an IR3109, but it's going to have a lot of a brighter, brassier tone to it. So that's part of it. Yes, and velocity routed to attack is a big, a really big part of the sound of this synth. So we're starting to see with this synthesizer kind of almost an Oberheim expander-esque level of some modulation going on that you don't get from every other synth. I know the Matrix 6 behind me can do that as well, where you're starting to be able to route things more interestingly than just your typical, two ADSRs for your filter and amplifier plus an LFO architecture that most of the synths from this era had. You're starting to really get some more complex stuff without even counting the 2 layers at once. And some really good keyboard sounds. I know it's supposed to be like a honky-tonk type of thing, but Monty, I can never tell when you're being sarcastic. To me, that like kind of harsh tone really does sound like a DX7. You know how like when you really slap the shit out of a DX7. So much of FM synthesis is based off of velocity. FM without velocity is rough. And so I think here you sort of can hear that Eric Persing and is it Adrian Scott or Dan DeSuva? I forget the other sound designer who worked on the JX. If someone could look that up for me real quick, that'd be great. But you could hear the influence there, right? They're trying to sell an analog synth that can do the types of sounds that the DX7 can. Now, in my opinion, it doesn't really get there, but it's actually kind of cool because it's its own sound as well. And again, there's just like such a forward-reaching thing about this synth. I mean, how crazy of a sound is that? You're almost getting like this wind chimey. I mean, are you kidding me? I mean, this isn't like a synth like the DW8000. There's no delay. Where it's just the delay or the chase is the phrase that Roland calls it. Oh, it's so good. Yeah, so just an incredible sound. I'd like to say that, you know, you can really see where Roland is going because the D50 came out the year after this. This is Roland's first all-digital synthesizer, and it inherits quite a lot from the JX. So for one thing, the Roland D50 is essentially a 4-part per voice synth. 4 partials is what they call it. Here it would be considered quad timbral. This is a bitimbral synth, but so they're already starting to stack sounds. And going back to that like e-piano sound, you know, the idea of layering an attack portion of the sound with a synthesized portion of the sound, that was carried over very directly into the D50, as was chase play. So you don't hear it as much on all of the sounds, but it is a feature in the D50, the ability to create a chase between the different partials that you have. Essentially, a D50 is actually bitimbral. A lot of people don't realize that. But then you can layer both of those. So you've got whatever they're called, tones and splits or patches or something. You know, like you can end up with 4 different sort of synth voices per note, but you do program it individually. There's like shared parameters. Anybody who's watched my D50 programming video will know that there's actually a lot of shared stuff on the top 2 voices and then the lower 2 voices. And so you just sort of see how this architecture led directly from this into the D50 the following year. almost like a little brassy thing going on in there too. Metal on wood. And to me, those types of sounds, they remind me a lot of the percussive sounds in the JD800, as well as even something like the M1, which would come out 2 years from now. And I have to say, especially if I kill the volume on the reverb here, I always hear the complaint about the synthesizer that, or the whole JX series, that the digitally generated envelopes are not snappy enough. But to me, I mean, like, how much snappier do you need than this? Isn't that kind of the thing? Like, what else would you need? Obese fifths. Wow. I love it. Wow. That is just crazy. Thomas Connors, I love the JX3P as well. I'm very, very excited to shoot these two out. And the 8P. Just to finally, when I bought the 3P, I was like, I didn't know which of the JXs to get. I kind of knew the JXs was the way I wanted to go, though. Okay, little brass sound. And again, it's using that chase, so you get this. At first, it's kind of like, oh, okay, it's another brass sound, but Serious, is this the biggest Roland synth? Probably. It's bigger than the JD800. The JD800 is a little taller, but not as wide. Certainly feels heavy. Yeah, just probably the best for pads. And again, if I turn chase off here, you can hear it sort of turns it back into a regular sounding brass patch, but back on, we get this interesting sort of stutter. Orchestrated flute. You can see we're in split mode here. So if I play down here, we get something like a soundtracky sound. And up here, we have the flute sound, but with a soundtracky type Roland pad thing. Very, very nice, actually. All of these sounds very good. Very DX7. Yeah, so that's the thing, Aquatic. To me, I don't find these envelopes to be slow, but I think, it's funny what bothers synth snobs. Can I get some scum snobs in the chat? For me, I do have a synth where the envelopes bother me. That's the Prophet 600. Even with the Glee mod, I still don't love the way that the envelopes respond. I think some of it's just me. I really don't think it's going to be a problem for a lot of people, but for me, thank you for the scum snobs, guys. It just, that since envelopes bother me. It wasn't released all the way up to spec. They were trying to put out a really great product, and the Prophet 600 is great. It's basically a Prophet 5, but affordable, and that's a great thing. However, the envelopes do bother me. Here with the JXs, I've never had a problem, even though that is what people said back in the day. Like, if you listen to that Tine, really good example of this 2 layers at once thing. Now, one thing you could say is, from a modern perspective, in a world where you could buy a DX7 for probably cheaper than this, or just use software like Dext or Native Instruments FM8 or something. What's the point of getting an analog synth that's trying to sound like a DX7, right? And that's a valid criticism. Very beautiful patch. It's almost like a little bit of a toy boxy type thing. And if I turn the reverb off, I think it loses something. Yeah, it's real toy boxy. But once you put the reverb, and that's what I'm starting to notice, I think this synth, more than any other synth that I've played, which would include the mighty Yamaha CS polysynth behind me, really benefits those sharp, metallic, really... Yes, you do get an ARP with the Verkoven upgrade. Mark Anderson says, low latency is a snappy envelope comment. Do you mean, like, is there any latency between when my fingers touch the keys? I don't really think so. I don't, no meaningful difference there. Slapback pad. Again, really, you could hear that almost all of these patches are trying to highlight the power of using chase play or the 2 layers at once. But there is like an almost trancey thing. Now, one of the reasons why, for me, the extra keys, I really think Roland was just like wanting to leave no feature they could afford on the table with this synth, because this is their sort of Hail Mary with analog synthesis. So many of these patches, when you go all the way down, we're getting a not very useful sound. So Keith Crosley, I'm hoping a fellow YouTuber who you guys probably know, who has a multi-poly. I think I am going to challenge them to try to recreate some of my monopoly patches with a multi-poly, and I'd be curious to see if they'll be able to do it. So that's something that might be coming up on this channel as well. Wow, just I'm really impressed by the patches on this. JX3P has good patches. I think the JX3P was one of the last synths Roland did without Eric Persing as the sound designer. I think he was working for Roland in '83, but basically as a spokesperson. Like if you ever look at footage from conventions and stuff back then, he's usually the one introducing the stuff in America. But it's definitely around the Alpha Juno 84, 85, somewhere in there was when he started doing the sound design, if I'm correct. Yeah, Sarah, you've got a real setup there, and I too am curious to see. I'm not going to keep all three of the JX synths. I've got three of them. Like I said, the 8P is coming, so that I can do a comparison between all of them. But I cannot possibly justify owning three Roland JX synths, so I'm only going to keep one, and it's going to be very hard to make the decision. Let's turn the verb down for a second. Really does have them airy vibes, man. But once you take it into, like a pretty good amount of reverb, you could get, doesn't have to be reggae, right? It doesn't have to be there. It's really cool sort of metallic texture. Here's one called Polysynth. Hopefully this one doesn't disappoint. Oh, it's just gorgeous. Oh, the velocity. So what's interesting also about the JX series is they do not natively have PWM. Now, there's a couple of ways around it, Sari. One thing is you can use a trick, and I believe this works on all the JXs, where you use, I think, hard sync and cross mod or something, and you detune the oscillators, and you basically get pulse width modulation. But you cut the synth down to one oscillator per voice by doing it that way, I believe. Of course, on the Super JX, or the JX-10, you have twice as many voices. So you could still do a, detuned PWM sound. And in fact, you could do different PWM rates, which would be pretty powerful. But natively, the square waves don't have like a way to route the LFO to pulse width. That's not a thing in the JX series. What's interesting, though, is that Verkoven does make a PWM mod for this synthesizer. And I know Dubstation Zero has some thoughts about that. I'll tee that one off to you, Nick. But basically, you can get inside and attach some daughter boards, and maybe it involves replacing the actual oscillators. I'm not exactly sure. But it could radically change the sound. Now, if you want to make the most tricked out analog synth of all time, especially in the vintage arena, that might be the way to go, because that is an omission from the JX series that other synthesizers do have. Pulse width modulation is a big part of a lot of sounds. Just ask Nick Bat, right? However, I think Nick and I are of the opinion, so many of my opinions are actually just Dubstation Zero's opinions, and I'm just parroting them. But I like the limitations, and I like that the synthesizer, this is just how the JX sounds, right? And it's part of the sound is not having pulse width modulation. I always say when it comes to recreating vintage synth sounds with modern equipment, whether it be hardware synthesizers or VSTs, the limitations are a big part of what leads to the sound. For instance, if you want to make a, vintage sounding pad, you can't use 4 LFOs because none of the synths from back then had 4 LFOs except for something like an expander, right? So yeah. Oh, Oilfield Pirate says it's your favorite, and I see why, because it's gorgeous. Replaces the clocks, so that's the high frequency oscillator, which is then divided down to give you the voices. Walter asks, by the way, hello Walter, how's it going, my friend? Walter asks, do you think of it as like a really big Alpha Juno? That's the question for me, because I love the sound of the Alpha Juno, but of course it's only got one oscillator per voice. So to me, this synthesizer could potentially make it where I don't need the Alpha Juno. Now, that synthesizer does have pulse width modulation, a sub oscillator per voice, and it can do sawed width modulation on the voices as well. That's how you get the famous Hoover sound. So even though they share the same chips and probably similar oscillators, there might be an argument for still holding on to both of them. Another thing is that synthesizer only has one envelope per voice, so you could use like the gate as a amplifier envelope, so just on off like an organ, and you have 6-stage envelopes, which I believe this one only has, it just has the typical ADSR. So there's actually quite a lot of divergence, even though the oscillators and filters should sound pretty similar until you get into some of the weirder oscillator shapes from the Alpha Juno. So I hope that answered your question. Dream Place, how are you doing? Welcome to the stream. So yeah, the Alpha does, so it's kind of like a give and take there. Stab Brass 8Va. I really do get like an Oberheim expander type vibe off of the synth. It's capable of brightness, right? To answer your other question, Sari, though, we'll put it into whole mode. Now, every voice is just playing, like we could play 12 voices at once this way. So we've cut down the layered element of the synth, but now we could play 12 voices. Right, I'm not going to lose anything. So if we go into tone, I think we're on the upper voice currently. And let's see, let's route the VCF LFO, so that's parameter 54, and then alpha dial that up. We'll turn it all the way up for this example, and we'll turn the frequency down, that's 52. So we can kind of hear, you can hear that it's approaching audio rate, but it's probably not there. And then the LFO rate is 73. I love synthesizers that have a little cheat sheet just printed on there. It's really not as hard to program. It's probably, let me re-say that. It's not hard to tweak. It might be challenging to program, but I do believe you can use an editor with an Vicoven modded synth. What's the waveform I'm using right now? 71? 71. Wait. 71. There we go. Random. Oh. So it's actually set to sample and hold, which is something I think you can do on the JX3P as well. Let's set it to sine, so we can hear the rate better. 73. Nope. 73. How slow can you go? Very, very, very slow. These are internal patches, Mark. So anyways, I just wanted to show you guys real quick. What am I on? C7 here. Just what the range on the LFO was. Oh, this one's great. See, like, again, with the lushness, why do you need PWM, right? You know, the chorus. It's so slow, it's like a Sun O song, the Vibrate Your Faces Off tour. Very beautiful sort of thing. And just eminently useful patches, which you don't always get on these vintage synths. Really crystalline, but not harsh. I think that's what's so interesting about this synth. Jazz organ. So everybody here knows I don't like organ sounds. It's good. It's good. It is what it is. Dancing flutes. Weird intermodular tone in there. You know, it's not the worst analog flute. I think all analog synths suffer when they try to do flutes, and this one as well. So then soundtrack, of course. Oh, Sanctuary card. Oh, it's almost all organs. Yeah, I got to get a quadrasynth at some point. I've almost ran the circuit on Marcus Rowell products. Yes, Law of Awe. I love an organ pad a la Where the Streets Have No Name, right? That sort of Brian Eno shimmer thing. That's where organs really shine for me. I'm not into just like kind of your typical old school. Like, just get a Hammond if that's what you want to do. I feel the same way about Celeste and harpsichord sounds too. Big digital. The brightness is crazy, and I could see how that could probably drive some people, like why some people don't like this type of sound. comparing this to something like the Kwai K3, which came out around this time, that actually has digital oscillators, this thing is so much brighter and capable of going into that digital space, whereas the K3 W8000, I've never owned a Prophet VS, but I would imagine it's in the same category. The actual hybrid synths of the 80s really have like this dark, mysterious, crunchy, glassy sound. This thing is very, very bright. For me, I love the so-called cold analogs of the mid 80s, but not everybody does. That's correct, Decarmit. It's giving wave station. You know, warmth all day, you know? One of the most beautiful patches I've ever heard. It's got that bright layer in there, but it's pulled so far back, and then the dominant layer is so warm. It's just like crawling up inside a cocoon, being covered in butter in syrup. I mean, it's so good. Reverb strings. Let's turn the reverb off. I'm just curious what it sounds like, you know? That's reverb off. Shredhead, welcome to the stream. How's it going? Happy Mondays. I don't know if I know that artist. Just gorgeous. Now, if I crank the reverb back on, respond so well to velocity. So, talking about if you wanted to buy a vintage analog synthesizer, you've sort of got, I would say, two main eras for analog polys. You've got the golden age, or the golden era from 77 with the launch of the CS80 and the invention of the Prophet 5. I don't think it really was available till 78. Through about 81, it was not a very long period, about that 4 years, where that's where all of the most famous synths, the Oberheim OBX, Jupiter 8, Prophet 5 already mentioned, just all of the ones you probably already know the name of. And then 82 comes along and you see the beginning of kind of the cutting down of costs. So you've got like the Poly 61 from Korg, you've got the Jupiter 6 from Roland, which is considered more cold sounding. You've got the Prophet 600. You have a lot of synths that don't have the same mystique and have this colder sound. And really colder just means a lot of the times that the filter can open up brighter, because a lot of those older synths, the filter is just sort of dark anyways on them. And that goes all the way up till about 86 or so. Pretty much everybody stopped making analog synths, or at least releasing new models in 86. A lot of them continued making them till around 1990 or so. But I think like the Akai X60 might be one of the last ones out there too. So on the topic, at the time, people, and I think this snobbery has stuck around, where people look at the colder synths as, you know, being somehow lesser than the really fat analogs. But to me, synths like the AX60, Jupiter 6, the JX-10, of course, JX-8P, Fender Chroma Polaris behind me, some of the most beautiful sounds, because what's so great about that era of what people call the late 80s analog synths, really it's like the mid 80s, because they stopped making them after 86, but or stopped making new ones anyways. But a lot of them have velocity and aftertouch, which you don't get on any of those golden era synths, aside from the CS80, of course. So the expressiveness that I was just hearing on this patch, sorry, there's a bit of a tangent, but the difference of being able to take this really, really sweet, or, you know, slap some funk out of that, and then you can get sweet, and then bad, and then sweet. Such a range of expression. And I hate to say it, I mean, we run a lot of synths through the legendary synthesizer test on this channel. And to me, once you've played a synth like this, which is more or less on par with any modern synthesizer in terms of expression, except for, you know, Polybrute 12, something like that. Once you've played this, it's kind of hard to go back to some of those less expressive ones. Again, this is just benefiting from reverb so much. If I turn that off, you know, you program some good warm release in there, but once you put the reverb on, this is the best synth for reverb. Juno 60, $18.99, new in the box. Is that the price when it launched, or are you saying now? Because now that would be quite a deal. It's funny that that's actually more or less held the same price. I mean, they go for about, like, I don't know, $2,400, $3,000, something like that nowadays. So, but of course, $1,800 or $1,900 back in, what would that have been? 82. Inflation's been a bitch since then, for sure. So just, I mean, incredible patches. I agree with Synthsonic. This is one of the best sounding synths we've had on the channel, in my opinion, with no holds barred, and that's including synthesizers that cost a lot more than this. I have a few of them, and I think this synthesizer has gone under the radar for far too long, and now's a good time to buy them. There was a couple of years there where you really couldn't see them for prices under $1,000, and there was only a couple on Reverb at any time. There seems to be more of them on the market right now, which is part of why I got one of these for such a good deal. And then basically I paid only $7 less in repairs than I paid for the synth. I should say too, because I got it through eBay the seller refunded me the difference there. Oh, a little fairy dust on top there. Now this is a very bright, so if I just bring a high cut filter in and we mellow out this reverb. I don't actually have the sheet music. I can't read music. That's probably obvious to anybody who's ever watched me play piano. Just beautiful. Backwards pan L to R. I'm going to bring the high cut off and bring the reverb down a bit. I wonder if I had the connection different. Backwards pan L to R. I'm wondering if it's almost for like a sunglasses at night type effect where you've got it from one side to the other. Real interesting sound. Calliope, not a calliope. Pretty good overall, type of a tone. Not really my thing as much, but glockenspiel vibes. Again, it just excels at these sorts of keyboard sounds, these DX7 adjacent. Okay, so organ pad. It is what it is. Jeffrey Sapara, how's it going, my friend? I myself am not a synth tech, so I wouldn't be able to tell you about how to open it up, but I do think that repairing buttons is one of the easier things to do on a synthesizer. So I think you're not out of, you're in good luck. It's not like you have some part in here that's going to not be replaceable. This is kind of this later, again, Oberheim-y expander matrix type sound. Not also my favorite type of sound. Cello orchestra. I don't have all four channels up, Dub. I've got... What do I have? I just have the stereo left and right. But that's another good point here, which we can actually do, what, 4 outs. So correct me if I'm wrong, Nick, but I believe you can run the synth with the upper channel stereo and the lower channel stereo, because I believe you can have different chorus settings on both, which would set this apart from even a synthesizer like the D50. I believe the chorus is global. I could be wrong about that. I'd have to go look at the PG-1000 behind me, but yeah, I think that with a little soldering and you can get replacement buttons for sure, and hopefully fix them. Sari asks, why is the MKS-70 so expensive compared to the JX-8P or JX-10? I believe they fixed some of the MIDI stuff in the MKS-70. Don't quote me on that, but I believe that's the reason. And people, synth snobs they remember what they felt when they first checked out a synth, and then like they stop right there. So again, this is Vocov and modded. MIDI is brought up to date. It's even added an arpeggiator. But at the time, I think people just thought the rack mount was the way to go, and that the keyboard version was just it had a bad rap. People didn't like the filter. They thought it was too cold, just like the Alpha Juno. For some reason, people really like the sound of the JX-8P. In theory, it should sound pretty close to identical to the JX-10 should sound like two JX-8Ps at once. But I've learned on this channel that you can take two synthesizers like the Prophet 600 and Fender Chroma Polaris that have the exact same oscillators and exact same filters, and they can sound wildly different because of implementation. So, there's also that. It could be that the implementation's different, like the biasing, gain staging of oscillators into the filters, things like that can make a big difference. So, same MIDI issues. Yeah, so I really don't know what the answer is. I thought there was something they did in the MKS-70 that made it, more desirable, but I'm not sure. Ambienauts, welcome to the stream. How's it going, my friend? Sorry I wasn't able to help you identify those sounds better. Really swirly type of sound. DCO Wave 2, so hopefully another really good digital sounding one. Oh, that really does have that. Little pitchiness to it, right? That's probably not the best way to play that one. Metallic E Piano 2. Do you have a theory on why that is, Nick? Once you put the reverb on it, it really doesn't sound that different than the JD800's Crystal Rhodes preset, which is like the brightest full tines sort of DX7 on steroids sound. Honestly, I really like these metallic E piano sounds. So let's bring that up a little bit even further. So bright and beautiful and glassy. Problem with these vacuum fluorescent displays, Sari, is that once they go, they can be a bitch to replace. Maybe with the Rolands, it's not as bad. There might be an LCD version of this. Also, again, just don't take my word as gospel. Definitely check that. But yeah, these things have a tendency to want to die. Actually, is this a vacuum fluorescent? Maybe it's not. Maybe it's just... it's hard to say. It's flickering on camera. That just has to do with the frame rate of my camera, but it's not flickering in real life, or you can't see it. Connor says, one day these cheap half rack units of mine will become stupid expensive. It's probably going to happen. Oh, there is an LCD replacement. So I do recall that correctly. So that's a good thing. Unlike some of the other synthesizers I have, which essentially if you want to replace the VFD on one of them, you have to cannibalize another synth. In this case, we're kind of good to go. Ooh, synth bass. We really haven't had any bass sounds here. So. Ooh, is it giving frontline assembly? Oh, wow, it's a split. So down here we've got... Yeah, we're definitely getting a little of that vibe. Really cool split. I appreciate that most of the sounds aren't splits. Look, if you're playing live, splits are very useful. And of course, I think this synth was sort of targeted at the touring musician. It's built like a tank. No fuck around parts to get fucked up. Even the Alpha Dial feels incredible on this synth as compared to something like the Alpha Juno. It's a big old dial. It feels like it could never break. No parts to get clipped off if, someone's rogue boot or beer or something like clipped something. So it feels like that. And so I guess that's why they have a split in it, especially by Timberly. But it's also just great that most of the patches are really using the layering, either the chase or just two sounds at once. I don't know what the wattage is, but it doesn't really seem to get too hot just to the touch. Maybe it's like screaming hot inside, but I can't tell. And Monty, yes, it was 86. Made till about 89. Many great, somewhat similar but different flavors of that sort of soundtracky pad type thing. Stick vibes. Touch polysynth. Ooh, lots of resonance on that one. Velocity to brilliance. So it's definitely the filter that just gives it this incredible brightness that you don't really get on almost any other vintage analog synth. I'm going to put it into whole mode here real quick. So now we're it's just listening to one voice at a time instead of the dual thing. And let's just crank it up a little bit. And then let's go to the resonance. So that's going to be tone 53, VCF resonance, and let's increase that. So we're at 63, which is already pretty resonancy. Let's bring that up. So this is max resonance. I mean, which to my ears, like, I get it. It's not fully self-oscillating, but damn. It's also not giving rush necessarily because you are losing a lot of low end. Let's turn that reverb down. Kind of distorted. I'm curious if we go to 61 levels all the way up. Let's turn that down and see if it cleans it up at all. And we'll just compensate with volume. Oh, I think it does. So I've cranked the volume up a bit here. So bringing the VCA level down, right, to about 70 seems to have cleaned it up. Giving a little bit more of that sound. And if we bring the level back up and compensate, hopefully it doesn't rip your eardrums out. You can hear we're getting amplifier distortion and actually quite a bit of it. Kind of mid-rangey. And yes, this is the last analog synth from Roland. Are you guys hearing that difference there? With the VCA all the way up, you are getting a little crunch. Kind of like a little overdrive. And then again, we can just bring the level down a bit and do the same thing. And to my ear, that's a little less distorted, right? Maybe I'm delusional. I don't know. What do you guys think? To me, it sounds like, you know, you can push it into a little bit of distortion. It's pretty similar. It's pretty close. Yes, JDXA came out around, what, 2014, 2015, something. It's just an interesting difference. A lot of the times I love VCA drive. On this one, I don't know if I'd go for it. I like how clean the synth sounds most of the rest of the time. Can I lower oscillator volume? Range waveform tune LFO. Mixer, yes. Okay, so let's go check that out. DCO1 and DCO2. Interestingly, they're not both at 99. They're very close though. So you could also say bring these down to like 75. Let's bring it down to like 70 and then 42, 41. What is that? 41, 42. Bring that down to 70 and see if we get a difference in tone. Certainly sounds like we do. Frozen Potato says, I've messed around with the oscillator levels and VCA levels, but that distorted sound usually stays. Yeah, so that might also be part of what gives this synthesizer its sound, for better or worse, right? So let's say the JX-AP doesn't sound as distorted as that. That will affect a few things. The distortion could lead to the brightness being, what it is, for what it's worth. So let's go ahead and just keep going. Oh, we got another flute. Another great thing is we have a bend range slider over here. We have two macro controls too, C1 and C2. So we can actually do macro stuff over here, which is super great, as opposed to, you know, the typical Roland Bender. Really, this one's got a pretty good amount of play in it. Just adds vibrato. Oh, you can't see because of my fucking beard. But bend range can also do things like, I have it set to a 7th now. Prismatic Spray, welcome to the stream. My boss's favorite record is Disintegration. So if that's true, let me know, because he would be very excited. Yeah, so that's just an LFO modifying the oscillator. And I believe it's the same LFO shared with wherever else you might send the LFO. I don't believe it has a separate vibrato LFO. I could be wrong. There could be the output switch could affect that as well, although in my experience the output switch generally just cuts volume, right? It doesn't really, you know, maybe at the top end you could clip on your way in to your mixer or your audio interface or whatever, but I haven't found it to boost. But it might be possible that the output switch boosts something. It does sound strong, and it does seem stronger than a Juno. That's another thing I should compare when I do my big shootout. We should also compare how this compares to a Juno. I think people would want to know. Very nice strings. You buy a JX-10, you are set on string pad type sounds, cheesy brass sounds, and really great E-piano sounds. You don't need anything else. There isn't like a bad strings patch on the synth. Honestly, the wave patches to me kind of remind me almost more, what am I thinking? PPG wave type sounds. Rock organ. That is what it is. E-bass, E-piano. Oh, okay, so we might have another, what is this? It's a split. So let's see what we got down here. Really good velocity again. Really nasty sounding, and then if you play quiet. Here, kind of like a similar sort of sound. Ooh, sync pad. So highlighting that this synth can do sync. Very bright sync. Oh, that's so cool to know that this synth was used on Disintegration. Really clampy. If you play with anything but the heaviest hand. Also, I have to say, I'm not really a keyboard snob, like, or a key bed snob, you know, like, I don't know. I'm not a great piano player. I don't really notice the difference. This one is great. I still kind of think maybe the D50 Alpha Juno has like the best. This one feels more like a piano to me. And I don't know how to describe that. It's just like the Alpha Juno D50 key bed is just like butter. It's just so nice. But this one's great too. I mean, it feels like it's brand new. This synth feels like I just got it off the factory floor yesterday. I can't believe it's the same patch, you know, if you just play quiet. Could definitely do some cool stuff. Marimbas. I think that Eric Persing was interested in making these sorts of percussive sounds, maybe because people had complained about the previous JXs of not having percussive enough envelopes. And the ability to layer transients again, I think, kind of brought that in there. Ah, the good old synth solo. So you do have different key modes. So let's go look at that real quick. So if I go to patch and I go to parameter 17, we've got key mode dual, split, T voice, X fade. Oh, I bet so you could do splits but fade them? Wow, that's pretty crazy. I was looking to see if they had like a unison mode. I don't think it does. Also, by the way, aftertouch can control vibrato, brilliance, and volume just like a CS80. So that's super cool. Well, not just like, it's not polyphonic. I was just looking, Sarah. I don't see it. Oh wait. It says unison detune right here under this, so I feel like I must be missing something. Yeah, there's got to be a way to kick unison on. I just don't know where it's hiding. But it seems to be a thing. I'm surprised none of these patches have demoed it so far. Wood mallet. Parameter 32 is unison? Is that for patch 32? Chromatic shift? No, I don't think so. Tone 32 is DCO mode. Or is it a button? That would be very silly if I just missed it. I don't see it. But there is unison detune. I can't imagine it's not there. I apologize. I just don't seem to be able to find it quickly. G7. Slow, huge strings. Okay, this should be good. 33. So patch 33. Upper key assigned poly. There we go. Unison. And then if I go to what? Lower. And then, okay, so lower tone. We make this unison too, right? That's interesting. Oh, unison. Maybe unison 2. And then we'll do unison 2 double unison. Okay, so what it appears to be is that you can put the synth into unison, but you could take it to something like 4 4 oscillate. I guess it would be, what is that? 8 oscillators per voice, right? So you've still got, 8 oscillators per voice. That's correct. Which should be enough oscillators, right? If I go to detune here and increase this even further, it's getting Juno Hoovery, right? But even in Unison 2 mode, I've still got 3 voices to play just because there's 12 voices. So you're basically stacking 4 voices per note, if I'm understanding that correctly. I think I'm just clipping slightly. Sorry about that. It's the Unison. There we go. It's still clipping even there a little bit. It's just a big sound. Yeah, I'm sure we could probably pick a different patch and get a better result, but this one wasn't bad. I've heard from my friend Jim Daniker that this synthesizer is like difficult to program because of the patch and tone management. I haven't really tried saving my own patches, so I might discover that myself. However, just editing the patches, I think it's pretty clear. You've got like kind of patch parameters, which are global, and then tone upper or lower is kind of just like what's over here. Yeah. Oh, Mono 2 stacks all voices on 1 key. Love all of these DCO waves have this very pitchy thing to them. Acoustic piano? Kind of reminds me of the Kwai. How are you doing? Yeah, I definitely need to check that out. Prismatic Spray. I actually think I'm going to get a retroactive one. It's good. Synth bass. That's very good. Yeah, Jim Daniker's incredible. Oh, this is interesting. So this is using the crossfade. Ah, yeah. So we got strings here. And then up here, we got brass. But then as you play, you get a little bit of both, right? Oilfield Pirate says, the patch tone system is stupid. The patch draws from the tone pool instead of each patch having its own 2 tones. If I'm understanding you correctly, what I'm assuming that means is that if you edit one of the tones, it's going to affect every other patch. Is that the problem? Is that what I'm missing? Is that what I'm guessing is going on? Yeah. And then MKS does, and that's why many choose it over the JX. Sorry, MKS does what? SysX. Oh, yeah, so the Verkoven mod, that's what I was saying, that the Verkoven mod fixes that. And that might be why people prefer the MKS-70 But it sounded like Dubstation Zero was saying that the MKS-70 had the same issues. I'm not sure. Machine Storm says, man, I'm trying to find a patch in Blofeld and UVI that can ravel the Microwave XT and having no luck. Microwave XT is a hell of a synth. Yeah. So, stereopping. Yep, I've got one of those back there. I could use that in the short run. I didn't think about that. That's actually not a bad idea, just to get through the video. I hadn't really thought about that mode, man, but that does present an advantage. The fact that as you change things, the knobs, you can have two-way conversations with the synth. Xylophone. A lot of these sorts of really short sounds, I guess for the time there was probably, and to this day, probably no other analog synth that quite does these as well, but they're not that exciting. Yeah, it's okay. Maze pad? Ooh, this is like the pitchy part of the DCO waves. Somatera, very interesting synth. This one's great too. And the last patch, high tiny piano. Let's turn the reverb down first. I think that's as good of a place as any to call it for the evening. What a fun time tonight's been checking out an incredible synthesizer. And of course, you know, just to have that sound of Twin Peaks under your fingertips. you know, it's really something special, and something else that I couldn't really ever imagine having. You know, it for me really was maybe one of the coolest experiences, just to hear that, you know. I don't know, just beautiful. Have a great night, Mode Man. Have a great night, everybody. I hope that this stream was as inspiring as it was for me as it was for you guys. That sentence was a little butchered, but I guess my point is that when I hear a synth like this, I immediately start wanting to compose something. I want to get out there and make some music, and I never do these streams to encourage people to have gas for vintage gear. In fact, in the best of all worlds, I would like it if you took the synths you already have and try to make some sounds. Maybe you heard a sound on this synth and you're like, ooh, I wonder if I could do that with the software I have. Or I've got a modern synth, and let's see if we could do that. Or maybe I just play a note or a little passage. Feel free to steal anything I play. I do play a lot of the same sorts of riffs, so I apologize for that. I'm not the most gifted keyboard player, working on it. But the strings on this synth really took it to a new level. And I always think about PWM when I think of strings, and I guess you don't need it. Connor, I'm glad you made it too. Thank you for being my friend. Really nice to have met you a couple of years ago. Hopefully I get to catch you again sometime soon. This was an awesome stream, Hypothesis. Thank you guys for making it awesome. The community here is next level. I'm not throwing shade at any of the other synth tubers out there. I'm sure they've got decent communities, but ain't nothing like the Scum family. I'll tell you what, I got 2 words to say. God damn, you guys are phenomenal. You make doing this every Wednesday night the best night of the week for me, you know? And I just want to say thank you guys so much for going on this journey with me. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. I love it when I have a product or a synth that I really like. I always try to show anything I get in the best light, especially if a company sent it to me for free. But I think y'all know when I really like something. And it's a shame Roland didn't send me this, because I would be glowing reviews for their new, if Roland released the JX-10 in 2025, it would be on my list of best synths of 2025. Like, you need to get this synth. It's got it's beautiful, bright sounding. You can do these really fat, incredible string warm pad sounds. Yes, this is the water, this is the well. Drink full and descend. The horse is the white of the eyes and dark within. The well being the Super JX, of course. Do you got a light, Percussion, yes, I always have it on my list of things to pick up. Yeah, it's a highlight of my week too, Synthsonic. I appreciate all of you guys. Aquatic, I think I've just talked enough shit about Roland on my videos that they may never. But I've come around. I appreciate what Roland's doing with digital synths now more than I used to. I especially think like the JX-08 and the JD-08. For me, I was like, okay, we've got like a lot of voices, and $300 right now, it's good. All the synths behind me are fake, Monty. They're just they're actually like pillows. Like if you go inside of them, they're filled with like stuffing, like whatever the inside of a Furby is. That's like what's inside there. Boss Enjoyer is a percussion guy too. Connor's new album was a lot of percussion, and that shit fucking hit. I was blown away by how good that thing sounded. It's hard as of today to feel like the JX-10 is leaving the studio, but it could just be that it has Eric Persing's patches in it, right? I think the JX3P sounds so fucking good too, and what I will say is that synth is warm in like a beautiful way. Some of the more recent streams I've done on that synth have made me feel like the JX3P is just incredible. So, oh my god, the Espencraft reference there. So, yeah, what can you drop it in the chat actually, Connor? can you drop your album? Let me see if I need to make you a mod real quick. There you are, Connor. Check it out. You're a mod now. Hopefully that'll allow you to drop the link to your album. You should definitely check it out. Roy, how's it going? And that's true for everybody. If anybody wants to drop their new music, Taryn Gray's new record, phenomenal. I don't know if I should be saying that yet. I feel like I'm not supposed to be talking about his new record. Dubstation Zero's music, live modular stuff, incredible. 2D Cat, that's 2D as in duh, cat. Incredible synthwave stuff. Fans of the channel, I appreciate that. New Twin Peaks is amazing. Not for everybody. Some people didn't love it. Here's my general thought on Twin Peaks: The Return. People who are David Lynch fans tend to love Twin Peaks: The Return. People who just love Twin Peaks, but not so much like the rest of David Lynch's movies, especially the California trilogy, The Lost Highway, Mulholland Drive, Inland Empire era, Twin Peaks: The Return kind of feels like that too, so not everybody loved it. Yeah. Hopefully the link works, Connor. I don't see it currently. I apologize if it's not possible. If nothing else, could you link to what it's like con.rar, so conn.rar, RAR, is that what it is? Hey, I think you're great too, Monty. So, oh, the link works. Okay, good. I just didn't see it for whatever reason. All right, guys. I think that's a great place to call it for tonight. Thank you guys for being so incredible. Have a wonderful one. Continue to be excellent, and I will see you in the next video.